So in this online lecture, I'm going to explain how to establish the relevance of your claim, and you do that in your non-summary conclusion paragraph. And the words that I really want you to circle on your graphic organizer: relevance and non-summary. Those are the words that really characterize what your objective is in this paragraph pretty well. In terms of context, I think this is a good place to start. And it's these two questions really that kind of reinforce what the non-summary conclusion paragraph is all about. What it definitely is not about is it's not about simply summary. It's not about summarizing what you've already talked about in your essay. But what we should really start thinking about this paragraph and our objective is first establishing so what, answering this question basically, so what? And why does what you just argued in your essay, why does it matter? So if your conclusion paragraph can essentially answer those two questions, then you are in great shape. So the purpose of our online lesson really is just to be able to identify and to define what are these phases of a non-summary conclusion paragraph that really help us establish the relevance of the ideas in our essay. So there are three phases to a non-summary conclusion paragraph. The first phase is this phase where you really try to name a larger issue that stresses the relevance of the claim, basically a larger issue that will kind of help answer so what, or why does what you just argue matter. So pretty much like the showing introduction paragraph, you're going to try to employ a really specific, concrete, singular example that displays the idea that's in your thesis statement. And the difference between the intro and the conclusion is that you basically have a few more options and a little bit more flexibility in terms of how you write the non-summary conclusion paragraph. That's what makes it different from the showing introduction. So then after you present an example, as always, our next step is to elaborate, to explain it. Extend the reader's understanding of it. Make sure they understand what the ideas are that you associate with this particular example. Explain how it illustrates the ideas that you conveyed in the claim of your thesis statement. So we present an example and now we explain it in detail. The third phase is the phase that we've been practicing pretty much since the beginning of the year. When you provide an example, and then secondly, when you explain it, now we have to be sure at some point to use some transitional language that connects what this example shows to the thesis statement. And so our goal is, as it says here, we're trying to connect this larger issue here to the thesis statement, and we do that by using transitional words and phrases to establish the relationship between these two moments in the paragraph. And our objective, as it says here, is really to try to glue everything together. So we're back to this idea of coherence that we've been practicing since last semester. So this will be a good moment now to stop down and do a little bit of individual reflection and take a look at those models on your graphic organizer. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to label all three of these phases in the paragraph. So first you will label the larger issue. Where do you see this larger issue that's being named by the writer? And then label the elaboration, where you see the writer really kind of stop down and explain the example, associate ideas with the example. And finally, where do you see them really going out of their way to use transitional language to connect this larger issue to the thesis statement? Again, go ahead and label these three phases of the non-summary conclusion paragraph and each of the models on your graphic organizer, and use a different colored highlighter or a different colored pen in your notability note. And I'll check this for an effort grade during our next class period. So now the question is, what are the three larger issues that we can use to establish the relevance of what we're arguing? Well, our first option is to maybe use some sort of community issue. Maybe there's some local, maybe some national, maybe some global or historical issue or figure that will help us establish the relevance of what we argued in our thesis statement, that will help us answer these questions, so what, or why does this matter? So that's one option. A second option is to maybe use some personal experience. So this could be something, an event that you directly experienced, or maybe it's some observation that you had, something that you witnessed someone else experience. Keep in mind that if you choose this option, you can write sentences in the first person in this paragraph, and obviously because you're coming from a first person perspective, and so it does make sense that you'd be able to write in the first person. So this is yet another way, another option, another larger issue that you can use to establish the relevance of the idea in your thesis. And then a third option is just simply to use another text. And just like in your showing introduction paragraph, this option really is no different. You can use maybe a work of literature, you can use a film, maybe a song, maybe some visual text like a painting or a sculpture or photograph. And what you might think about is if you use this option in the showing introduction paragraph, you might use the same text to work with in your non-summary conclusion paragraph. And you might try to find another example from that text that you could use to bookend your body paragraph. So this is what's known as bookending. So you're working with the same text in both the showing intro and non-summary conclusion paragraph, and you're just using different examples to bookend the meat of your essay, the body paragraphs. So some final helpful reminders and suggestions about this paragraph. The whole point of this paragraph is essentially to reinforce why your idea matters, because it shows that your idea is universal. It shows that your idea is applicable to other places, whether it be a personal experience or a larger issue like a local issue or historical issue or another text. So why does your idea matter? And the second thing is, a really helpful suggestion is just think about the issues in other classes that you might be able to utilize for this paragraph. What have you covered in faith formation, in world history, in fine arts, etc.? You might be able to use examples from these other classes for this paragraph. A third suggestion or a reminder is the framework for analysis. This framework also applies to this paragraph. It applies to every paragraph that you write, where you provide an example, you explain it, and then you are sure to connect it all together by using transitional language. And the final suggestion would just be work with something that's familiar. Don't just randomly Google something. Work with a text you're familiar with. Obviously work with an experience that you've had that you're familiar with, and don't just go Googling what you talked about and finding some random something from some random person. So I think a good way to close would be to just think about the claim in your thesis statement, and I'd like you to respond to this question. What larger issue right now, if you think about it, might you use for your non-summary conclusion paragraph in your essay for the house on Mango Street? Go ahead and respond to that question, and again, I'll check your graphic organizer for an effort grade in our next class.